Hi, third grade. We are back with the second half of our expository text shared read called Moving America Forward. Last we met, we read the first half of this text and learned that the Ford Model T car had a great impact on the history of how people move around in the country. Henry Ford, the maker of this vehicle, found ways to make the vehicle dependable yet very affordable so a bunch of people could get it. For this lesson, you will need your Reader's Writer's Companion book and a pencil. Then open up to page 64. Let's continue reading this text and see what else we can learn about the history of the Ford Model T.
Assembly required. Henry Ford did not invent the assembly line, but in 1913 he improved on it. Ford rolled out a moving assembly line that made building cars much faster. One Model T used to take more than 12 hours to build. Using a moving assembly line, workers could build a car in 1 hour and 33 minutes. To build a Model T, workers and machines worked together. There were 84 steps. First, some workers stood at assembly stations, putting small car parts together. Then, a moving conveyor belt carried the car parts along as more workers put them together. After that, the body of the car was pulled along as more workers put their parts onto it. Then, the engines and gas tanks were added. Finally, the car bodies were assembled and the car was finished. The moving assembly line changed transportation in the United States. Workers could build many cars at once. Business boomed. Captions. These workers on an assembly line are putting together Model T cars in Detroit, Michigan in 1927. Many inventions have made it safer for people to drive cars.
So, an assembly line is where there is a long line of people, and each of them have a job in putting the machine together. The parts that they use to put the machine together travel down a conveyor belt, kind of like what you see at the checkout at a grocery store. They didn't have to move these objects from place to place themselves. The objects just moved down the belt, almost like being delivered to them. This saved a lot of time. The assembly line in this photograph was taken in Detroit, Michigan in the year 1927. Our first question focuses on paragraph 1, and we will summarize. Underline how Ford improved the assembly line. Then, summarize in your own words. Let's reread this first paragraph and look for details about how Henry Ford improved this assembly line. Henry Ford did not invent the assembly line, but in 1913 he improved on it. Let's underline this sentence as a detail. Ford rolled out a moving assembly line that made building cars much faster. Let's underline this part of the sentence where it says, rolled out a moving assembly line. This part of the sentence is very important because it tells us the main part of how he changed it. The assembly line was moving. One Model T used to take more than 12 hours to build. Using a moving assembly line, workers could build a car in 1 hour and 33 minutes. Building an entire car in 1 hour and 33 minutes is quite impressive. Using that moving assembly line really worked. Let's underline this half of this last sentence as another detail. Let's summarize on the line. We want to write a sentence about how Henry Ford's moving assembly line made building these cars so much faster. So let's write Henry Ford's moving assembly line made building Model T cars much faster. Go ahead and write that on the line. The next question focuses on paragraph 2. This one's on sequencing. Draw a box around what happened after the engines and gas tanks were added. Right here in this sentence, it starts talking about the engines and gas tanks. I'm going to focus my attention on this part of the paragraph because that's what our question's about. It says, the engines and gas tanks were added. Finally, the car bodies were assembled and the car was finished. So what happened after the engines and gas tanks were added? Well, the car bodies were assembled and the car was finished. Go ahead and box that in.
Timeline. Drive safely. 1885. The first seatbelts were used. 1903. Mary Anderson invented the windshield wiper. 1915. Cars stopped at the first stop sign. 1938. Cars first used turn signals.
This next question focuses on the timeline. What happened in 1915? Look at the timeline and look for the year 1915. Do you see it? What happened in 1915? The timeline says that in 1915, cars stopped at the first stop sign. Let's write that on the line. Cars stopped at the first stop sign. Next, it says circle the year cars first used turn signals. Can you find the year where cars first used turn signals? The timeline says that 1938 was when cars first used turn signals. So I'm going to circle that year. Let's continue reading.
A world on wheels. The price of the Model T dropped to less than $300 in 1925. More and more people bought them. As a result, more roads and highways were paved. Then gas stations and hotels sprung up. Next, many people moved out of cities. The people who lived in the 1920s started to appreciate being able to drive to work or go on a journey. Driving around was an agreeable way for them to spend time. Their descendants today may find life before cars hard to imagine. Sidebar. Mary Anderson and the windshield wiper. Mary Anderson invented the windshield wiper while riding a streetcar in 1902 during a snowstorm in New York City. After watching her streetcar driver jump in and out of the streetcar to clean off his icy windshield, Mary had an idea. First, she sketched her idea. Next, she worked out a plan. Then, Mary built a model out of rubber, wood, and metal. Finally, in 1903, she tested it. It worked. By 1913, more people bought cars. Thanks to Mary Anderson, they had windshield wipers.
So this Ford Model T really did change how we move in America. Once everybody got this car, the world around it had to change with it. There had to be more roads, highways, gas stations, and hotels. People even moved out of cities because it was easier to travel. This first sentence focuses on paragraph 1. This one's on sequencing. It says, what happened after gas stations and hotels sprung up? Right here in this paragraph, it talks about how those gas stations and hotels sprung up. Then it says, next, many people moved out of cities. So that's what happened after all these gas stations and hotels sprung up. Many people moved out of cities. Let's write that on the line. Many people moved out of cities. Now we have to circle the signal word that helped us realize that it happened after. The signal word is next. Circle the word next. This next question focuses on sidebars. This is the sidebar. A sidebar is text that is separate from the main paragraph on the page. It's usually a shorter piece that gives more information about the topic, or it can give other viewpoints. This sidebar is about Mary Anderson and the windshield wiper. The question asks, how did Mary get the idea to invent the windshield wiper? Well, it says that after watching her streetcar driver jump in and out of the streetcar to clean off his icy windshield, Mary had an idea. That's a right there question. It's asking, how did she get the idea? And it's telling us exactly, Mary had an idea. She got that idea from watching the person jump in and out of the car to clean the windshield. Let's write that on the line. She got the idea from watching the driver have to keep jumping out to clean the windshield. Go ahead and write that on the line. Now it's asking us to underline our text evidence, and that would be this sentence right here. Let's underline that full sentence. All right, boys and girls, that is the end of our shared read, Moving America Forward. I hope you've enjoyed learning about this Ford Model T and all the ways that it impacts how America moves. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.